an original.
From Story Studio Network.
Well, here we go. It is the ultimate day of October 2023. The 31st day, otherwise known as Halloween. In most sectors, everybody panicked about the weather forecast in your part of the world. I don't ever remember that being an issue when we were kids. I just don't. And I don't even remember it being an issue when our kids were out doing their thing. It was a little bit rainy or snowy. Okay, fine. I mean, if it's a torrential downpour, different thing. But that's all part of the fun and festivities of Halloween, right? So, welcome in. Dave Trafford here. It's Now and Next for Story Studio Network. Got lots to talk about this week. It's going to be a fun one on Friday on The Ledge, your Ontario Politics podcast. Oh my. We told you last week there was going to be a document dump, right? It happened yesterday at Queen's Park. Very messy. I know there's all kinds of people who are, the pundits saying, well, you know what? People just want housing and they really don't care about this stuff. That is true. People want housing and to some degree don't really care about the meatball, the sausage making at Queen's Park. But the overarching flood, this is like fire hose stuff. It's no longer a drip, drip, drip. And the association of the Ford government with, and they admit, corrupt process. And I know they're going to split a hair, but I think it's pretty hard to just separate the process from the people in some cases. So we'll get into that on Friday morning. And I know Keith Leslie's already rubbing his hands together. I can see the smoke coming off them. He's rubbing them so hard. Yeah, we'll get into what's going on at Queen's Park on Friday morning. Because who knows between now and then. And the reason we do it on Friday is because the legislature's not sitting. So it's relatively quiet at the park. But as we speak, Premier's going to have to, answer for some of the stuff that came out in that document dump. So by the end of the day, this being Tuesday and morning when we record, whole new mess on his desk. So, all good. All right, and also this week we're going to have David Coletto drop by and get his take. I mean, he's been watching it closely, of course, what's going on federally. But we did touch on it last week, the carbon tax collapse. And for the sake of the politics around it, is that the end of the Liberals in Ottawa? Is that a clean path for the Tories and Mr. Poilievre into, well, he won't be in 24 Sussex, but you know what I mean. So that's what's coming up here on the program on Now and Next. Last week was more of a feed drop. Featured some really cool shows that we're working on here in Story Studio Network, including Aaron's new show called The Fourth Draft. If you get a chance, you should drop by The Fourth Draft. And here in this part of the world, we spell fourth with a U. Yeah. Fourth draft. And she's talking a lot about the state of media in this country. An important conversation. But today, got a chance this week, actually yesterday, Monday of this week, to meet some old friends and meet them in person. It was great. Well, I had the opportunity to see some old friends, old acquaintances, and the funniest thing is, I saw a guy in person whom I have known for years, and we have been, talked to all the time, but had not met one another and been able to shake a hand. And that was that all happened this week. We were at up at Downsview, and we were there to mark the launch of a new book that has been put together by the folks at the Royal Canadian Air Force Foundation. And for those of you who don't know, the RCAF celebrates its 100th anniversary in April 2024. So this is just one of the many things that the foundation is involved in. And they're telling stories about the RCAF. And for those of you who listen in this feed, you'll know last year we did a limited series for the foundation. And it's one of the ones that we kind of have most fun pointing back to because it just was really fun storytelling around things you didn't know about the RCAF and about aviation history here in Canada. So happy to welcome in Jeremy Diamond. He is the CEO, the founding CEO at the RCAF Foundation. At some point, you guys are what now? Almost 3 years into this? 4?
Yeah,
almost.
Yeah, almost finished our third year. Started in early 2021.
Yeah, so
as I look back,
middle of COVID, right? So it
yeah,
was
middle of
just
COVID,
perfect timing
in the basement, exactly.
Yeah. It was funny because I sat down yesterday, and you guys were just starting your presentations, and just was a bit of a shuffle in some of the chairs, and the guy sits down next to me, and he's in uniform, and a chair away, and I'm on the outside. Everybody's focused on what's going on the stage. So it wasn't until it was all finished that I tapped him on the shoulder, and our friend John Wright turned around and realized, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And and John and I talk every week, right? John's on our On the Ledge podcast. We're constantly talking to each other. But you know what? It's the first time I saw him in person since you guys had your Remembrance Day services at Mount Pleasant last year. And we're in that phase, aren't we? We're trying to do these things in person, but how often we're relying on remote. And to me, that kind of made the whole event feel like community.
It was really wonderful to launch a book in front of people, to launch a product in front of people, and to have the people involved in the book to be able to speak to those in attendance, right? Not only sign a book, take a picture, but tell me a little bit more about what you shared in the book. Tell me a little bit more what you shared on stage. We'd love to talk to you about this project. We can't do that on Zoom. We know we can't do that on video chat as well. And the energy that I'm seeing in rooms in the last couple of months has been wonderful. People are thinking about the next projects, how to get together again, how to attend events in the future. And I know I fed with a lot of energy when I go into those rooms and meet those people, and it was exactly that yesterday.
So it was out at what's it called, the Aviation Hub? It's at Centennial College.
Yeah. So it's a Centennial College sort of campus out at Downsview Park, which of course has its own long history with the Air Force. It was CFB Downsview, CFB Toronto from the 30s all the way up into the 80s, and still has a base there adjacent to this area. So there's a school there. There's the Downsview Aerospace Innovation and Research Hub. There's planes there. There's all kinds of things going on, and it's part of just a growing space at Downsview. You have the hangar, play basketball. You have Toronto Metropolitan University as a campus there now, as a hockey rink. So it is its own sense of community up there. But when you drive in or you come in walking through the subway, you're greeted with planes. It sort of calls you into the space. And we were grateful to be able to have the event right amongst those aircraft there. And it obviously makes it a lot easier to tell the story when that's the case.
Well, it was cool because the two authors of the book had a connection to that site as either young cadets or serving in the military. So, we forget that in Toronto, I think.
We do. We just don't have the presence of the Air Force in the city, right? The closest kind of presence we have for the RCF is up in Borden, in Barrie, at CFB Borden, which is the largest base of any kind in Canada and has a wing up there as well. But we just don't have the presence in the city. You don't see RCAF personnel. You don't see as many RCAF or air cadets walking around. There's not a natural spot to go there and ask a question and take a photo and learn a little bit more. So through this book and through the Centennial next year, we're trying to create opportunities to bring people that are in uniform, bring people that have an RCAF and an aviation story into the city to be able to have those conversations. And we're going to be out across the country to different cities, but there's bases and wings in other cities. There's not in Toronto, which is surprising, of course, considering the size of the city. But there's lots of opportunity there. So, yeah, it was a good start yesterday.
The thing I liked about this is that you had a real chemistry between the two co-authors here, who obviously knew each other over the years, but very different paths in terms of their association and relationship with the RCAF over the years.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Hood, former RCF commander, lifelong member of the Air Force, a long and distinguished career. Mike's been a contact and a friend of the foundations because it was his and John Wright, our chair's idea for this foundation back in 2017, 18. And I remember having conversations with them back then as thinking about what does a legacy of the Air Force, of the RCF, look like into the centennial and beyond, and what does a not-for-profit, a separate organization, look like then? So he was already sort of thinking about that legacy while he was ending his tenure as RCF commander. But what he wouldn't necessarily want to be known as, or what nobody refers to him as, is he really is an RCAF historian. I mean, the amount of information and the depth of the detail that he recalls, that he has studied, that he has lived, is nothing short of impressive. And so we're, thrilled, grateful to have him not only involved in putting his name on the book as somebody that's well known in the RCF circles, but he was down and dirty with the details and very involved with the writing and the research with this. And then Tom, as you said, his path is much different. A cadet from a very young age, wanted to be in the Air Force, but his eyes and pre-LASIK and corrective surgery prevented him from flying the way that he really wanted to. So he's had to contribute in different ways from the civilian side of things. And in his business and in his circles, he has supported the Air Force and aviation, excuse me, for a long time, and is also on the Air Board and Aviation Council of the Air Force. So stays very close to the commander and the command structure in Ottawa. So they come with different perspectives, but the same amount of passion and the same amount of interest and engagement. And so there was no chasing them down to get information and to convince them that this was an important project. They, if anything, were right out in front the whole time.
And it was said many times, I mean, 100 years, 100 stories, that's kind of a nice, neat fit, except there are way more than 100 stories. And I know they talked about that yesterday in terms of those that they highlighted, but I'm thinking, knowing the way these things worked, you had to have made those decisions well before you got down to the serious aspect of writing the book. So your researchers had to have been fairly engaged in vetting the top 100 stories, right?
Yeah, I think it's to get down to 100 because there's great poetry to that. But I think what we wanted to make sure that we did was tell as many of all of the stories as possible to make sure that that this book included the important stories of the pioneers of the Air Force, women, people of color, those that have maybe not made it to the minds of people that think of Air Force. They think of Lancaster Bomber, they think of Avro Arrow, they think of Billy Bishop. There are more stories than those three. And so trying to be inclusive, not for the sake of inclusivity, but making sure that the stories that people may not know are just as important as those stories and to have them included as well. But I will tell you that doing a book is exciting to compile those stories and to make those decisions, but it's not an end. We know, as you said, that there are many more stories. So what are other ways that we can tell these stories and others? What are the next 100 stories? What are the ones that we couldn't make it in the book because it would be a 1,000-page book that very few people would buy? How do we tell those stories into the centennial and beyond? Through videos, through podcasts, through digital, social. So we see this as much as a finished product as it is a starting point to tell these stories well into next year and beyond.
Well, here's hoping, and it was alluded to yesterday when you were talking to folks that some of those folks who are getting your scholarships are going to be featured in the next generation of storytelling.
I love that. Yeah, we had scholarship students at the event yesterday. We have seen them at other events. They've become our youth ambassadors. We've given out over 250 scholarships and bursaries in the last 3 years, the largest of its kind in Canada. For a young organization, we want that to be a big part of our legacy. So I've met these young people. They will be in a book very, very soon. The inspirational stories that they've come to us with to allow us to think about awarding them a scholarship is great, but they're already thinking about that. They're inspiring the next generation, and they're only 20, or 21 years old. These are the next astronauts. These are the next pilots. These are the next senior officers of the Air Force. There's no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. We started off here talking about how being in community and actually seeing people in the flesh. And, I pointed out that I hadn't seen John Wright in more than a year. Rod Black and I have been working together for years. It was the first time in about 6 years that we had seen each other face to face.
Glad we could create this experience for you.
It was so important for me. And Rod was your moderator MC and was able to coax some of the stories out. What I found interesting though is after the fact, and back to your point about Zoom calls and video, so on. You can't kind of hang around afterwards in the Zoom room. That happened for a good while after all your official programming was finished. People were lining up to get the books, but there was a lot of conversation going on. And one of the conversations I was involved in, they were talking about the Air Cadets and how important that is. And this is a perceptual thing in terms of how, some of us would think of the Air Cadets as being this funnel for people who are going to go into the RCAF. And one of the guys involved in the conversation said, you know what? That's not what it's about. It's about creating good citizens. It's about creating people who understand the importance of community. They may never fly a plane. It's not the point. The point is that we're putting good people out in the world and we're giving them some kind of guardrails and context and what it means to be a good person in your community. I thought, okay, maybe there's another chapter on that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I've met a number of cadets through this. We were hoping to have cadets, but there was a last minute conflict yesterday to have them attend. But we will work closely with them or continue to in the future. I think two things about the cadets that is really important is service and volunteerism. And in those two things, you could do that in cadets. You could do it in your local community, at your library, whatever it may be. But that's what you're learning out of that. You're learning public speaking. You're learning about going to events and having conversations with strangers. Those are all things that are going to serve you very well as you go into a job interview, as you apply to university, as you enter the professional workforce. And it aligns with passion and interest in aviation. But as you're saying, it doesn't always lead to that. And it leads to you being a good citizen, an engaged citizen. One that will really make a difference in your community and your country. And we need more of that, of course.
Yes. So whether you're flying an F-18 or you're teaching kids in grade 3, those are qualities that we want in our folks.
For sure. And one more point on this, I often find people come to me and come to the foundation talking about their cadet experience. And they're in the professional world, and they may not be in the aviation sector, but they often refer to that when they were 15, 16 years old. And I make a point, and I'm in this sector, so it's not that surprising, but I hope and encourage others to make a point to go and speak to them when they see them in front of Starbucks, or they see them, with asking for donations and talking about their story, or seeing them at a Remembrance Day ceremony that we're doing on the 11th, and they'll, of course, be there for that event, to talk to them about, how did you get into this? What do you want to do? Like, this is part of their development too. They're not just standing there for a good photo op, or shouldn't be. They're young people that have passions and interests and engagement in these things. And I encourage everybody to go up and have a short conversation with them. It's good for their growth, and it's good for our learning as well.
Well, if folks want to, I know there were a lot of signed books there yesterday at the event. I'm assuming we can order that online.
Yeah, just come to our website, rcaffoundation.ca. You can click on Pathway to the Stars, and then there's a link there of our events, a little bit about the book, and there's a very quick link to buy the book right on our site, and we'll ship it right off to you.
Jeremy, thanks for doing this, and congratulations. That's a major milestone for you and the group, so well done.
Thank you, and thanks for your continued support. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
Yeah, there you go. RCAF Foundation.ca. Jeremy Diamond is the founding CEO there, and you can make donations to support the scholarship program. I'll get it out of me. And just, kind of get a sense of what's going on there. They do good work, and they tell great stories, and part of that, of course, is we've had an opportunity to do that. So next week, we're going to feature the 4 the limited series that we produce for the RCAF Foundation. And it's the first series of Pathway to the Stars. That's the name of the book, by the way, as well. And we tell some really cool stories about really cool people and cool technology. So that's next week as we move into Remembrance Week here on Now and Next. I'm Dave Trafford. Thanks for being here. This is Story Studio Network.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Now and Next is produced by Becky Coles. Our production manager is Jamie Nickerson. Audio editors are Mike Trutler and Drew Garner. And our sonic logo designer is Greg McDonald. Our executive producers are Dave and Aaron Trafford.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.